den rechten.
Bir müşteri olan
Den rechten Teil an der Nordseite.
Moving forward.
Mesdames, Messieurs,
I would like to show you a riddle. At the end, there ought to be about 20 pictures, and these pictures are organized based on a certain rationale. And, well, the purpose of this puzzle is for you to guess what this rationale is, and then there's a deconstruction of the world. Well, I think that the audience does not want to speak about what they see here, but maybe if someone could quickly say what they're seeing, well, that would be most welcome. Well, is there a volunteer? Well, in the columns you've got the countries, the lines, you've got the rows, you've got the various types of housing. So, is Iceland, France, Italy, and Germany? So first scattered housing, then villages, towns, small towns, bigger towns, and last but not least, big cities. And here there's a red line. This red line deconstructs this table because for each country, this line shows what statistics consider to be urban or rural. And you can see that different countries have different definitions of the urban or the rural. The logic behind it is maybe culturally driven, maybe technologically driven. It's probably closely related to the urbanization process that these countries experienced. And my presentation should give you a few pointers about the underlying logic behind these differences. These are maps from the 1980s. And here, there is no single uniform definition, despite attempts at doing that in the 19th century with the International Statistical Congress, a very interesting organization in all aspects of measurement of people, the census, etc. The National Statistical Institute only used the commune. The League of Nations did not make references to the urban. Then the UN, after 1952, country-specific definitions by specifying the method used, and here no systematic approach that would be worldwide. Now questions comparing housing. What sets a city apart from a village? That's a very old view. How can you compare a city, conurbation, urban area, metropolis with another? Is it possible to find a way to make different spaces comparable? What sets the urban population apart from the rural population? Does the rural population still exist? How to grasp this process, this urbanization process? What are the challenges associated to defining the urban and the limitations of the urban areas going outward? So how to draw the line? This is the question that statisticians have been grappling with for 100 years. Is the peri-urban a distinct space, or is it integrated into different urban spaces? Urban indicators have been the longest used, but they're also the most controversial, so the most interesting. Here things get complicated, but these are the sources and criteria used over time that have showed fascinating changes. First, the administrative status based on size and geometrical measurements, then morphology, density, social economic structures, once again morphology, functional approaches, multivariate approaches in the 60s, morphology again, the functional approach, commuting, and density and morphology. And if you look at the sources, in different countries, registries, censuses, mapping had to be developed, measurement, having data at the level of the town, then morphology again in the 30s, then the census measuring flows, databases that made it possible to quickly process large amounts of information, satellite pictures which once again redirected the logic, then mobility, commuting, and then Google Earth, which at the global level has changed our relation to space. There's one global approach from the 1990s that's used and applied to all urban areas in the world. Here, Sedgen, Nurek, here the city of Genoa, Nurek, Morricone, Ebrard, embarked on a global worldwide comparison with one indicator, which is the building stock continuity, which is a morphological criterion that was first seen on maps, then aerial pictures, then satellite pictures. That's the simplest way to compare urban spaces on a global basis, but that's also a relatively low extension or low weak dynamic compared to other approaches. Peri-urban spaces are the main form of urbanization, have been since the 70s or 80s. New urbanistic concepts, the detached house as a response to suburban density, cars as the main mode of transport, the shift from agriculture. These are so many key aspects. In Germany, they don't use the term peri-urban. In French, in France, they do not so easily use the term suburban. The boundaries of the peri-urban in France are measured with commuting, which gives a different spatial aspect to the urban. In Germany, the urban is defined by density over time with different historical approaches. The peri-urban is morphologically rural but socially urban. The peri-urban is urban spaces but without continuous building, using Nurek's definition. Here you've got industry next to motorway exits. This is the tunnel effect based on highways. It plays a major effect. Urban areas have no enclaves or islands. That's a very old statistical definition, but reality is different. Here I have little time, and here I'm showing you a quick definition of the urban in France, a very long history dating back to the mid-19th century, based on the size of a locality, which requires good statistics, and then it was a morphological definition up until the post-war period. There are two main proponents of a multi-communal conurbation approach, Muriot and Benle, in a country with small towns, which was a fundamental shift in terms of different approaches, types of towns, compared to countries with very large towns or which experienced phases of merging, of towns merging. And so then there were the ZPIUs, the bigger areas, and then the urban area zoning, ZAU, having multi-polarized towns, peri-urban rings around centers or towns that are looking towards different centers, giving a different view of France in 2002, and the new definition that's just been developed. For the US, the approach is completely different, but it dates back to 1790. That was the first approach, the first definition of size and units, and over time they've worked on units of a larger size and also aggregating towns into counties which are have been institutionally defined since the 1950s based on commuting towards the city centers, and you end up with that result here.
And this takes me to the end of the presentation. If you look around Geneva, if you compare the French approach compared with the Swiss approach, so you have the French approach looking at Switzerland and vice versa on the right-hand side of the picture, and you can see that the distinction, the difference between the definitions is to be found in the peri-urban areas. The Swiss approach is more conservative. The French approach, looking at commuting, produce 40% of spaces in distant peri-urban areas. And the conclusion of all this is that the definition of the urban space is a secular concern of society, because it makes it possible to look at the relationship between society and territory. The major issues of indicators, looking at different measures and the difficulty in changing accepted definitions. And yet, this is a dynamic indicator looking at a changing phenomenon. Adaptation is crucial, and extension of urban construction is something that has occurred over the past few years around the globe, maybe not in post-1990 Russia. But having said that, the methods of measurement are linked to technological progress and political developments, and so that definition has always had was something of an issue, because very often the challenge was to define large populated areas. Statistics is, of course, a relevant measurement, but that measurement should be independent, especially from political pressure, and that is not always easy to do. And in fact, we find that some of the very statisticians that create definitions, that produce statistics, they have their own views on urbanization. These views may well be dated by the available technologies of the time, and very often we find that this may also qualify, that may bias their expectations.
Den Rechten.